It was supposed to be just another regular morning at the airport. Passengers hurried through security, announcements echoed overhead, and a young black girl named Maya clutched her backpack tightly as she stepped toward the gate. She had one goal: catch her flight to Washington, D.C., to attend a scholarship ceremony that could change her life. But just as she was about to scan her ticket, a stern-faced officer blocked her path. Officer Griggs. Cold eyes, tight jaw, and no explanation. "You're not getting on this plane," he said flatly. No reason, no warning, just a wall of authority and silence. People around her looked confused, some whispered, but no one stepped in. Maya, stunned and hurt, asked why. Griggs only doubled down, insisting she step aside. As minutes ticked by, frustration turned to fear. But what no one, especially Officer Griggs, realized was that Maya wasn't just any teenager. Someone was already watching. 8 minutes after the confrontation, a call was placed from a secure line in Langley, Virginia. The CIA was now involved, and they weren't happy. What did Griggs really stop that day? Was it about Maya, or something far bigger? And why would a simple airport scene suddenly grab the attention of top intelligence agents? The answers weren't at the gate. They were buried deep in secrets, lies, and a plan no one saw coming. What happens next will flip everything upside down, and not everyone will walk away the same. As the minutes passed, Maya's anxiety grew. She was used to feeling eyes on her. Being one of the few black students in her school had already taught her to navigate spaces where she didn't always belong. But this time, something felt different. Officer Griggs was relentless, and the crowd around her began to murmur, unsure of what was happening. Maya stood there, trying to stay calm, but the air around her grew thick with tension. She glanced down at her phone to double-check her flight details, but her hands were shaking. It felt like the whole airport had turned against her. Maya didn't know it, but Officer Griggs wasn't acting on a whim. His demeanor, cold and unyielding, wasn't just the result of some personal prejudice. There was something much bigger at play. His instructions had come from higher up, and he knew that crossing certain lines would lead to consequences. Still, he wasn't prepared for what was coming next. Back in Washington, D.C., an encrypted call had been made. The CIA wasn't just monitoring some minor issue at an airport, they were tracking a person of interest. A person who, by all accounts, had no reason to be connected to a government operation. But Maya's name had popped up on their radar weeks before, linked to a file that no one had expected to grow legs. There was a bigger game happening here, one where Maya, unknowingly, was a crucial piece of the puzzle. Griggs had just unknowingly triggered something much larger than he could have imagined. And now, with the CIA on the line, the stakes had just risen exponentially. Maya stood frozen, her mind racing. Officer Griggs was still standing there, his expression stone-faced as he watched her closely. Every second felt like an eternity, and the soft murmurs of the crowd only made the situation worse. She wasn't sure what was happening, but something didn't add up. Her heart pounded as she tried to remain calm. She had done everything right, checked in early, passed security with no issues, and now she was being held back for no reason at all. As she tried to figure out what was going on, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The strange glance she had caught from a few of the passengers, the odd silence when she tried to ask Griggs what was happening. It all felt staged, like some carefully orchestrated performance. Little did she know, Griggs had already been warned to be on high alert for her. Her flight wasn't just a routine trip. It had been flagged by a shadowy group within the CIA. Across town in a dimly lit office, agents were watching closely. A team had been monitoring Maya for weeks now, tracking her every move. There was a plan, and she was unknowingly at the center of it. They knew more about her than she could ever imagine. Her family background, her grades, even her social media activity. To the outside world, Maya was just an ordinary teenager, striving for a better life. But the CIA saw something else, a connection to something much darker and more dangerous than anyone realized. Meanwhile, Officer Griggs, though clueless about the full scope of the operation, was feeling the heat. His orders had been clear: stop Maya from boarding this flight. He didn't know why, and frankly, he didn't care to ask. He had always followed orders without question. But this was different. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the weight of unseen eyes on him, watching his every move. The last thing he wanted was to make a mistake. Maya, though, wasn't just going to stand there. She had worked too hard for this moment to let it slip away. "Why won't you let me get on the plane?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "What's going on? I haven't done anything wrong." Griggs remained silent for a moment, his eyes scanning her, as if looking for something more than what was on the surface. Finally, he spoke, his tone barely above a whisper. "You don't belong here," he muttered, his words dripping with something she couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Or was it something else? Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever was going on, she was no longer just a passenger. She was a piece in a much larger game. As the seconds ticked by, her mind raced. There had to be a way out. But just as she opened her mouth to demand answers, the phone in Griggs' pocket buzzed loudly, interrupting the tense silence. He'd pulled it out, glancing at the screen for just a split second before his entire demeanor shifted. The coldness vanished, replaced by something far more serious. He glanced at Maya one last time before walking away, leaving her standing there, more confused than ever. What had just happened? Why did everything suddenly feel like it was spiraling out of her control? The mysterious call from the CIA had changed everything. They were watching closely, and something told Maya that this was just the beginning. Maya stood there, trying to process everything that had just happened. Griggs walked away without saying a word, his phone still buzzing in his hand. The sudden shift in his demeanor unsettled her. The tension that had been thick in the air only grew heavier, like a storm waiting to break. She glanced around, looking for anyone who might step in, anyone who might explain what was happening. But everyone seemed to have their eyes averted, as though they were all caught in a strange trance. Was she really the only one who saw that something wasn't right? Her mind raced as she took a step back. There was something deeply wrong here, and she could feel it gnawing at her gut. Officer Griggs wasn't acting alone, and neither were the people watching her. She felt as though the walls were closing in on her, but she had no idea why. What had made her so important? Was she truly just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was something much bigger at play? In the shadows, an unseen figure watched her closely. Someone who knew exactly who Maya was and what she represented. It wasn't just a matter of stopping a teenager from boarding a flight. It was about keeping a secret, one that had been buried deep for far too long. They couldn't afford for anyone to know. Not now, not when the plan was so close to being completed. Maya didn't know any of this. She had no idea that her life had already been entwined with forces much larger than she could comprehend. But she felt it. Something was coming, and it was going to change everything. She needed answers, and she needed them now. She made up her mind. No more standing around, waiting for someone to make a move. She would find out what was going on, even if it meant going against everything she had been taught. As she stepped toward the gate, the tension became unbearable. The sharp sounds of security announcements echoed through the terminal, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Just as she neared the gate agent, another figure appeared in her path, one she hadn't noticed until now. It was a man in a black suit, his posture rigid and controlled, his face masked in a calm, unreadable expression. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but his presence was undeniable. He didn't look like someone who would stop a teenager from flying. He looked like someone who could change the course of her entire life in an instant. And judging by the way the people around them seemed to scatter, he wasn't just any ordinary person. Maya froze. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. The man stepped forward and spoke in a low, measured voice, his words cutting through the hum of the airport. "You're not getting on this flight, Maya." His voice was calm, but the force behind it was enough to make her blood run cold. "And I think you know why." Maya's mind went blank. She had no idea what he was talking about. Before she could respond, A voice from behind her interrupted. Griggs had returned. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the man in the suit. The tension between them was palpable, like something much bigger was hanging in the balance. What was this man's connection to her? And why did Officer Griggs seem so shaken? Maya felt trapped. The gate was locked behind her, and the only way out was past these two men who now stood in her path. The clock was ticking, and she realized that every choice she made from this point forward would lead her into the unknown. She needed to decide quickly, fight for answers or comply and risk disappearing into the shadows forever. The silence in the terminal felt deafening. The air was thick with anticipation, and every second that passed seemed to bring her closer to something she couldn't quite grasp. She had no way of knowing what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This was the turning point, the moment when everything she had ever known would be forever altered. Maya's mind was spinning, the weight of the moment suffocating her. The man in the black suit and Griggs were standing in front of her, the distance between them closing in with every passing second. She didn't know who this man was, but the icy chill in his eyes sent a jolt of panic through her. Why was she so important? What was this really about? Just as the silence stretched unbearably, the man's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his eyes narrowing as he read something on the screen. Maya couldn't help but notice the shift in his demeanor. The calm, controlled exterior faltered for a split second. It was enough to make her heart skip a beat. She wasn't just being stopped for some random security issue. No, it was something much more calculated, something that involved these men more deeply than she could understand. Before she could react, the man's phone buzzed again. He snapped it shut with a sharp, frustrated motion, then looked directly at Griggs, his voice suddenly cold and commanding. "She's no longer our priority. The order's been changed." Griggs froze, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Maya's eyes darted between the two men. Had she just heard that right? "What do you mean?" Griggs asked, his voice almost shaky. The man's lips curled into a tight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've been chasing the wrong girl, Griggs. The real target is someone else. She's just a distraction, a pawn." Maya's stomach dropped. Distraction? Pawn? What did that mean? She felt her body tense, every instinct screaming that the situation had just escalated beyond her control. Griggs took a step back, visibly rattled by the new information. The man in the black suit turned to Maya, his gaze steady, unnerving. "You don't know it yet, but you're caught in the middle of something much bigger than you realize, and it's already too late to walk away." Maya's breath hitched. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just some random airport encounter. There was a bigger operation unfolding, one that had her wrapped up in the middle of it without her consent. She was in deeper than she had ever imagined, and the more she learned, the more she felt like a player in a game she couldn't win. But as the words echoed in her head, another thought pierced through the panic. What if she wasn't just the pawn? What if she was meant to be the one to uncover the truth? The pieces were scattered around her, and each revelation only made the puzzle harder to solve. The man in the suit took a slow step forward, locking eyes with her once more. "We'll be in touch," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "But until then, don't trust anyone." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing there, paralyzed with confusion and fear. Griggs stayed behind, his eyes lingering on her for a moment before he too turned, disappearing into the crowd.